Hello, everyone. We will begin in just a couple of minutes. I will be putting some updates in the chat. We will start shortly. Thank you for your patience. Hi, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started so we can give Jose the most amount of time possible to present. My name is Davi Kallman, and I am an Access Advisor at the WSU Access Center. I'm also the Awareness Coordinator, so I help put on events like this. I want to tell you a little bit about the Access Center because it is so important to this initiative and what we're trying to do with the speaker series. The Access Center provides accommodations and services to incoming and current WSU students with disabilities that limits their access to the educational environment. Through this, we support the self-determination and development of students with disabilities through removing barriers to academic success, promoting self-advocacy, and providing support to foster student learning and engagement in all opportunities available at the university. We also help to foster support through awareness programming events throughout the year, such as events like this one. We would like to welcome you to the Disability and Intersectionality Speaker Series. The idea for the series evolved from the racial unrest happening across the country. In response, the Access Center has developed a statement in support of the Black Lives Matter movement and has examined its policies and procedures for bias. But we also knew we needed to do more. We hope that this series helps to shed light on the importance of giving a platform to underrepresented voices. And this is especially important with everything we're seeing across the country right now. This series is made possible through S&A fees and is presented by the WSU Access Center and the Disabled Students and Allies Club. Just a special note, and I keep putting this message in the chat, but I know new people keep on coming, so I'll keep putting this message. We do have live captioning available for this event. To access, please select the closed captioning button at the bottom of the Zoom window, and then select Show Subtitle or View Full Transcripts. If Zoom captions are not working, there is a backup link that I have put in the Zoom chat. Captioning and a transcript will be available on the video recording in a couple days. The video recording will be available on the Access Center website after the event. This link is also put in the Zoom chat function. We also have an interpreter for the event today. You'll notice it is Ashley up at the screen. She is also an Access Advisor at the Access Center. The interpreter is working alone today, so she may need to take a 5-minute break during the presentation, but I assure you she will return. Also, this event will count for common reading credit. A link to a Qualtrics survey will be put in the chat after the Q&A. Please make sure to click the Qualtrics survey in the link in order to receive your common reading credit. Just a note, that link will not be put in till the very end of the presentation. Students who are receiving extra credit for class or for programming credit through fraternities and sororities, there is an automatic link as soon as the presentation ends. Make sure you stay till the very end and it will connect you to that Qualtrics survey for extra credit for classes and for programming credit. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Matthew Jeffries. Matthew Jeffries, he, him, his, serves as the Director for the Gender Identity, Expression, and Sexual Orientation Resource Center at Washington State University. In this role, he supports system-level change and 6 campuses in their creation and implementation of LGBTQ plus affirming policies and procedures. Additionally, he supports students and channels their energy for activism into tangible and material change. Prior to this role, he worked in academic advising, new student programs, and residence life. Matthew Jeffries has been an instrumental role in increasing positive portrayals of people with disabilities across the university, and he's a true advocate for all people with disabilities, regardless of their disability and the severity of their disability. So without further ado, thank you, Matthew Jeffries, for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Davi. That was very kind of you. I want to begin briefly with a land acknowledgement. Washington State University Pullman is located on the ancestral homelands of the Palouse people and on the ceded lands of the Nimiipuu or Nez Perce tribe. I think it's important as a land grant institution that we recognize the lands that we sit on. I know that that's not representative of all of our campuses because we are, a broad system. But knowing that the people who took care of these lands, since time immemorial, is important for how we continue to engage with conversations of reconciliation and social justice. And I think all of these, as Jose will talk about, are inextricably linked. All of our struggles are tied together. So as Davi mentioned, I serve as the director of the Gender Identity Expression and Sexual Orientation Resource Center, affectionately and most commonly referred to as GSORC. We are one of the many offices within the Division of Student Affairs, and we work very closely with the Access Center in trying to engage with universal design however we can. Now, in this role, I most often highlight where we as WSU can improve how we serve our LGBTQ individuals in our CUBE community. I think and consult a lot about names in our systems. How can we affirm people's pronouns and just other ways that we can demonstrate care for others in our communities. Now, my focus is, of course, and it will continue to be on creating affirming LGBTQ spaces. I can't do that without thinking about how other identities are impacted, right? No one is LGBTQ in a vacuum, which I think Jose will talk about pretty extensively today, and I'll introduce him in a minute. But we all have these other identities that have shaped who we are in our lived experiences. And so within that, right, there are social locations, things such as race or social class, ability, sexual orientation, gender, and then there's the social identities, right? And so maybe social identities for sexual orientation, gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, etc. But those all interact with other things in our systems, and many of our systems are historically tightly coupled. Rochelle Datch, I want to give her a shout out because she was like, you should read this book, Disability History of the United States. And in there, I learned a lot about LGBTQ history and how folks were turned away during immigration for being disabled or for what they considered being disabled was also queerness. And so these tightly coupled histories, I think, showcase that our liberation is all tied up together. Again, I don't think we'll have true liberation or true affirming spaces for LGBTQ people until we figure out how to include all LGBTQ people, right? Folks with disabilities, folks of color, undocumented folks, et cetera. Need to feel affirmed in LGBTQ spaces, not of one particular type of queer person. Queerness is multitudes of things. So with that, I am extremely excited to introduce to you all José Rosario. So this presentation is hosted by empowerment speaker, author, and mental health and human rights activist, José Rosario. Jose uses his disability to connect individuals to the world. As a Latino gay man who utilizes a wheelchair, Jose recognizes that there are common experiences that bring people together, that taking stock of who we are gives us power. Now, besides all of those things, Jose is also a mental health professional. And through this, he understands that this empowerment and the creation of a space to be vulnerable can lead to individual and group growth, awakening agents for social change, which I love, especially in my role. And then additionally, on top of all those things, he is also a clinical psychology PhD student at Clark University, where his work focuses on disparities in effective mental health care after violent events that target specific identity groups. So without further ado, welcome, Jose.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that introduction. um, I definitely must drink a lot of coffee in order to get everything done, so thank you all for having me. So, to give you a sense of what we're doing today, I'm going to share with you my story in the most unfiltered way possible to talk about the different experiences I've had and how they intersect. Part of what really drew me to the speaker series is this focus on intersectionality. None of us are one thing. We are a multitude of things coming together to create our human experience. And so let's start without being too cliche at the very beginning. So I was born about 4 months premature, and my Puerto Rican grandmothers would tell you that I fit in the palm of their hand. Now I laugh and say that they're being dramatic, but maybe we'll go with it for now, I guess. And I was born small and in the NICU for about 4 months. My parents really didn't have any idea what was going on. My parents were both first gen, had just come from Puerto Rico just a couple of years prior to that, and didn't really speak much English and or understand the medical terminology that was being thrown around. And because they were young, a social worker approached my parents and said, "Are you sure you want to do this? No one's going to judge you if you want to give this child up for adoption. It's going to be a lot of work." And I am very grateful that my parents were like, "What do you mean? Absolutely not. This is my baby, and this is what I'm meant to have." And so they stuck it out with me throughout the 4 months in the NICU. And being hopeful and optimistic, they thought that when I left the NICU, things were going to be normal, however you want to define that. I don't know that normal truly exists, but I went home. And what we didn't notice was that the machine that would help me breathe was not given to us, nor were we made aware that we would need it. And so I went home without a machine to help me breathe. And it was about a week later, and I have since gotten permission to share this story, that my mom was in the shower and she heard a gasp in the baby monitor. And in that gasp, she knew something was wrong, so she ran to my room and she found me in my crib, blue in the face. I had stopped breathing. Now, my mom, and this is the part of the story I had to get permission for, ran outside and was like, "Please help." We lived in a community with all of my family around, and we rushed to the hospital. It was there that we were told that I had stopped breathing for 11 minutes and 54 seconds. So almost 12 minutes without oxygen, and there was some brain damage. And so I developed cerebral palsy. And at that point, again, they asked my family, are you sure that this is something that you want to do? And they said, yes, this is something that we want to do. We will do. It's not even a question. And from that moment on, began my journey as a person with a disability. And it wasn't an easy journey because just like we didn't know about, or I say they didn't know about medical terminology and what was really going on, they also weren't prepared or equipped to advocate for a child with a disability. There is no handbook, there is no resource to say, "I'm going to guide you through this process." It was something that we all, myself included, had to learn on our own. And for the most part in elementary school, my peers were relatively nice. I remember feeling included in some ways, like when they created a license plate for my wheelchair, but also excluded in some more covert ways, like activities that were being played at recess that I couldn't really take part in. I found my way, but it wasn't the same. And that made me sad. And to some extent, I think, 6-year-old Jose was probably angry. And I have a vivid memory of sitting in my closet and saying, why? Why did God, why did the universe, why did some being or thing have to do this to me? Like, why couldn't I be like everybody else? I just wanted to be able to jump rope or run track and do all of the things that my friends were doing. And I was really frustrated. But my parents kept saying, this is your life and you're still going to do a lot of amazing things. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. And I'm not trying to give you that impression at all. We have a story in my family that we affectionately call Cat Day. And cat day was the day that I was crawling around the classroom because I wasn't provided a wheelchair. And it was a fight to try and get a wheelchair. But in the interim, didn't have a wheelchair and I would crawl. And one day, the door to recess was left open and a stray cat walked in. And the cat started following me around the ground and started sniffing me. And students were laughing because they didn't know what was going on and they thought it was funny. But it actually really hurt me and hurt my feelings. And then I went home crying. And it was that day that my mom said, "You're getting a wheelchair." And within the next week, the situation had been handled, as she would put it. My mom is affectionately known as Mama Bear in my life because she is very adamant and sure of what she does. So we got a wheelchair. And you would think that that's where the struggle ends, but it doesn't because life is more complex and intersecting than that. And so through this process, through getting my wheelchair and getting situated, we decided we wanted to make my health and well-being a priority. And we started physical therapy. And I worked really hard and stretched every day and did all the things they told me to do. And things were going okay. But one day I went to see a doctor about being able to increase my mobility or just increase quality of life in some way. And the doctor looked at my parents with me in the room, at this point about 8 years old, and said, "You need to give up on the dreams that you have for your child. This child is not going to accomplish the things you want him to accomplish, and you're going to need to reassess what he's actually capable of." Now, these words hurt. For an 8 year old, they're almost earth moving because we don't understand what's going on. We don't know that those people who are supposed to care for us can make mistakes. Language matters and words matter, and what we say matters. And that little boy ended up feeling so hurt and angry and sad that he just wanted to give up. And I remember telling my parents, "I'm not doing physical therapy anymore." Now, the reason I told you my mom's a mama bear is because she said, "Oh, that's cute. You're doing physical therapy." And we did it anyway. And she pushed me because she said that I would never let somebody else tell me what I could or could not do, and that she believed in me. And my dad did too. And they worked with me to make sure that it happens. So if we look at these two examples, someone saying reassess because they're not going to reach the goal that you want them to reach, and someone saying, "I believe that you're going to find your purpose and your way of doing things," they're total opposites, but both equally strong. They can both have some sort of impact on the human psyche, on the person's experience. And to this day, I have to thank my family for being supportive and for learning how to advocate alongside me because that wasn't easy. So, to wrap up the story about this medical professional, I will share that I had never seen her after that again. And everybody says that one day I should, but for me, that's just not the point of my story anymore. Nobody gets to decide what that looks like. And I worked really hard and started stretching and physical therapy again. And next thing you know, I was walking with two canes. And this isn't a, "whoa, look at me, I did all these great things" kind of story. That's not where we're heading. But it was an accomplishment that I wouldn't have been able to make had I let someone limit me. And limits are a part of my story all throughout. So, fast forwarding a little bit, you all probably remember adolescence. And I don't know about any of you, but I never want to be an adolescent again. I'm really glad that stage of my life is over. Acne and awkwardness, I'm all set. But adolescence was hard, and it's even harder when you have a disability. In the social aspects, I couldn't go to parties as often as my peers were going to. Sometimes I would hear things like, "We'd like you to come, but we have stairs." And also, let's just call it out, dating as a person with a disability is real, real hard. Not to mention, I didn't really know my place as a person of color. I gravitated towards other people of color, but that meant my circle was small. And so it was hard to socially engage with people. Somehow, some way, I had some really solid friends who really held my experience, but couldn't really understand. And that level of not understanding increased when I decided to start thinking about my identity as a person in the LGBTQ plus community. Now, I come from a very religious family. My grandparents, who I mentioned at the very beginning of this talk, would tell you that, I was born again after dying because of some great purpose. And in their own way, this identity, this part of me, would have been rejecting that purpose. And so that was a really hard process I went through that affected my mental health. Now, we'll talk about purpose again in a few minutes, but I do want to share that it felt really isolating to go through that and to go through it around other queer people who have very different experiences, who aren't looked at and automatically made judgments on attractiveness or ability or uh, I guess level of difficulty is the way that I would put it. People were saying that it would be hard to date somebody in a wheelchair, and that impacted my mental health. Meanwhile, I was living in a very Latino family where criticizing your looks and thinking about your appearance is a very typical experience for a lot of us. And so it was often like, oh my goodness, who's going to want you with all of this acne? And who's going to want you if you're not trying to walk? Or, who's going to want you if you're not really putting yourself out there? And there was just a lot of judgment. And yet again, words started to really impact my mental health. And that was my first experience with actual depression. And my first experience with feeling like I was different, and being different was not only a why me, but it was actually a burden. And I didn't know how to combat that. Mental health wasn't talked about. As many communities of color, there's some stigma around mental health care and mental health access. And so I didn't have the tools. So what did I do? I turned to advocacy. And now you may be thinking, well, advocacy, that's a great outcome. Like, yeah, let's do more of that. But you see, my advocacy was something that I would call detached. It was meant to serve a purpose for others without really thinking about how I was feeling. So I threw myself into peer education, specifically around suicidality, substance use, and other risky behaviors. And I worked really hard. And next thing you know, I was being approached to be a youth intervention consultant for the city of Providence. I'm from Rhode Island. And I accepted and was the youngest member of the mayor's sort of team. I almost would call us like a pseudo Avengers for risky behaviors. And it was a really great experience where I learned how to be an advocate, how to be a leader, how to pull data and use data to make a claim. And I got to do a lot of really cool things, including a workshop for NASA technology to talk about substance use. And that workshop in particular sticks out because it was something I was so proud of. We were bringing a drunk driving simulator, and it was going to be epic. And after the event was over, we had served so many people. They were thanking everyone, and the person thanked me for organizing and said, Jose, thank you so much for being here today. We're just so grateful. I mean, you got up and got dressed this morning. Isn't that incredible, everyone? And I was shattered. I mean, you're telling me months of work, and what you're thanking me for is for getting up and getting dressed in the morning, something that you and I both do every day. And it just felt like my experience was being minimized because of how I looked, not how I worked really hard, not how I felt, not my drive, but because I was sitting in a chair. And that felt just really distressing to me, but I wasn't really sure why. You see, advocacy allowed me to ignore the fact that I was struggling. It allowed me to ignore the fact that my identity, plural identities, were developing and that I needed to find ways to cope with that. And I pushed and pushed them away until I couldn't anymore. It was brought straight to the forefront in front of so many people. And it was around that time when I started college. And I knew after this advocacy work that I wanted to study psychology. And I was already looking at research labs and I had a whole plan. And I came into college, and if there's one thing I would tell any college student or university student out there, is that when you enter college, if you leave the same way you came in, you missed an opportunity somewhere to do something really important, and it's actually find yourself. So I went in with the goal of being a clinician, of being a scientist with data. I wasn't thinking about my identity. Sure, I had a wheelchair and registered with our Disability Services Center, but that was the extent of that. I never really thought about what it would look like. And I decided that I needed an on campus job and worked at the Access Center, a disability center at our campus. And it was there that disability became part of the conversation. And I joined the student club and started advocating for reform, but it still felt disingenuous. You see, asking me to do things because of my disability still ignores the rest of my experience. The fact that I was first gen, the fact that no one in my family had gone to college and my grandparents went to elementary school in Puerto Rico, and that was pretty much the end of their education. It ignored the fact that I was still in the closet and struggling with my identity. All of that was kind of pushed aside. But yet again, I focused on disability advocacy and my psychological research and studies. Okay, I've told you a lot about how I grew up, but let me tell you about my catalyst, the moment that changed everything for me. And so I was a senior in undergraduate, and a organization reached out and said, "We have a mental health conference and we want you to speak on disability and mental health." And I thought, sure, yeah, what data do you want? How can I prepare for this presentation and give you something to make a change or to promote some sort of agenda, so to speak? And the person looked at me and he said, "No, we don't want that. We want you. The data can come later, but our focus today is on your experience. And we want to know what it's like for you as a person in the mental health space, as a person, as a human. What is that like for you?" And at that point, I thought, oh man, I really stepped in it now. Like, I cannot say no. I've already agreed to this. I'm stubborn. How am I going to get out of this? And I couldn't. And so a week before the presentation, I had started to think, oh, I don't even have slides together. I don't know how to do this. How do you talk about yourself? And when I finally got to making slides the day before, I recognized that I was getting emotional. And it was while I was putting these slides together and pulling baby pictures, which unfortunately you don't get to see, but maybe another time, I started crying because I never thought about how my life had led me to this moment and how mental health work really truly did never reflected me or my experiences or my community, and that I never talked about what it was like and what I was feeling like while I was trying to navigate all of these different identities. And that to me felt really vulnerable, and it scared everything out of me. I thought, I can't go up there tomorrow and say this in front of everyone. What if I cry on stage? What if I share too much and my family finds out? This could be really bad for me. And the day of the talk, I'm sitting backstage and I'm thinking, the exit's right there. I could just make a run for it. No one has to know, right out the door. But of course, again, I had already said yes, and I couldn't just, flake on my responsibility. So I remember telling myself, what's meant to be will be, and what needs to be shared will be shared. And I stepped out on stage and I told my story. And I started at the very beginning, just like I did with all of you today. But I told my story and talked about how hard it was to not see myself represented in the mental health space, to not see all of my different identities coming together the way they did inside of me, and how at certain points in my life, different parts of my identity were the focus, but never as a full person. And we never had conversations about identity and diversity. You see, all the research I had done, my supervisors never really had a lens towards identity. We never thought about, do these things transcend communities? We had never had these kinds of conversations. And I was able to share that yes, having a disability is hard and being different is hard, but it's also a benefit and a gift because it allows me to connect with people in a much more real and vulnerable way. When we actually share our experiences with other people or take stock of those experiences, even on a more basic level, we really can connect with people because the secret is we're all different. We all know what it's like to operate in spaces sometimes where we don't feel like we fit in. And that can be really challenging. But I also recognize that representation matters, particularly in mental health and particularly in the things that we talk about, because it's not going to be a one size fits all approach. Mental health is so vast because no two people have the same experience. Even if we share identities, our experiences are going to be different. That difference is what makes life exciting, is what makes progress and hope possible. And it wasn't until that moment that I recognized, oh, my story has power. Just like the language and the words that were shared at me that broke me down and made me feel like I wasn't good enough or that I didn't have anything to offer, my words allow me to give other people hope, to do the exact opposite, to do what my parents had done for me. And that was a whole new realization. I finished that talk, and I have to tell you, after that talk for a couple of days, I was feeling just completely worn out and so open and raw. And I had done this talk in front of some of my friends. And so friends of mine were reaching out and saying, like, I had no idea that this was your story. And it was all great and connecting and empowering. And we all felt really hopeful. But I was feeling like it couldn't just end there. That storytelling could not be a one and done deal because that wouldn't do what I had always set out to do, make an impact in the world. But what I didn't realize was that my impact is directly tied to my identities. It's tied to my experience, to my feeling of feeling left out, of feeling like there are limits set on me that aren't fair, of feeling like systems are not built for me. And how do I approach these systems in a way that still allows me to make a difference? So I remember speaking to my friend who asked me to speak at the conference and saying, I don't know what you did, but the bug has been bit. And I want, and I'm not even sure that's how you say that saying, but I have this bug now and I want to share my experiences more. I can't stop doing this. This is something that I need. And he said to me, okay, if this is something that you want, I can help you make it happen and you can share your story again. And I didn't realize that when he said that, he meant a keynote at a university at 22 years old. And I was like, oh, absolutely not. I cannot do that. I'm not seasoned enough. I'm not experienced enough. I'm just a kid. I'm just a young adult. Like, I don't know anything. And he said, trust yourself. And I went into that talk and talked about my story, but also talked about what is it like to be an activist? What is it like to be an advocate? And the main takeaway of that talk was that our identities and our experiences will guide our advocacy and our empathy and allow us to do really meaningful work if we are willing to acknowledge the fact that we all have experiences we bring to the table. And I get emotional talking about it because during that talk, I saw that somebody in the front row was crying the entire time. And I was thinking, what's going on? So my clinician hat goes on, and I say, I'm just going to check in. And after the talk, I went over and said, hey, I noticed you were crying. I just want to see how you're doing. And I wanted to just say, how are you? And the person started crying even more. And now this is the second time in this 6 month span where I'm like, oh, you really stepped in it now. Now what are you going to do? And I just hugged the person and let them cry. And when they were ready to pull away, they said, I'm so sorry. And I said, don't worry about it. Crying is good. Crying is valid. And they said, well, you're the first person to ask me how I'm doing in at least 5 years. It's been so long since someone has asked me, how am I doing? And it was that moment where it felt like somebody threw a bucket of ice on me. And I knew that I needed to do this, that psychological work in terms of research, that mental health care advocacy, that wellness advocacy, activism in general could not be siloed to my academic experience. I had to shift my worldview to acknowledge that I needed to talk about identity, that I needed to create a space where my vulnerability allows others to be vulnerable and share how they're doing. And through that talk and from that person, my organization, the Phoenix Empowered, started. And the Phoenix Empowered is the organization where I share my truth, just like I'm doing today. And I travel and talk about what my experience has been, but with the goal of creating what I like to call empowerment spaces. And so when we talk about identity, we have this really nice mentality of wanting people to rise up and organize and be activists and make change. But what we forget is that for a lot of us, myself included, systems, people, experiences, their words and actions tend to bring us down. They tend to make us feel like we can't rise up, like we can't be visible, that we can't share our experiences. So my work is particularly tied around sharing my experiences as a way to model that you can and should and must share your experiences, because those experiences are what's going to make real connection happen, what's going to make real movements come forward, what's going to make us real activists or advocates or supports or hell, even friends. It's going to make us better people because we're sharing our experiences with one another. And that vulnerability has so much power and can really make change. And so, my goal today and always is to tell you that each of your experiences matter and that each of your experiences have space and give you some sort of experience and knowledge. You have tools that you are equipped to use to make a difference in the world. Not one person has the responsibility to save the world, but we all have the purpose and drive and capability to make some sort of change. And my hope is that these empowerment spaces create more spaces for this empowerment, create more spaces for vulnerability, for hard conversations about things like homophobia, racism, internalized stigma, all of the things that impact our day to day life. We want to make sure that these things are part of our conversations. And so, what happened through Phoenix Empowered? My entire life kind of changed. I ended up becoming a clinician at an access center, the same one that I received services from, full circle moment there. And I at first was like, I don't want to do that. That's too slow. I want to be in a hospital setting. I want to do clinical work that's really fast paced. I was an addictions counselor. And they said, well, we want somebody with mental health experience, somebody who can really connect. And so I said, I'll give you a year. We'll do a year while I'm doing talks and while I'm doing the Phoenix Empowered, and we'll see how that goes. And I was there for 2 years, and it changed my entire life, changed the trajectory of my work. You see, before taking this job, I was going to be a substance use researcher. I was meant to study substance use in communities and look at interventions and different ways in which we were going to make change in a community and promote healthy well being. But after talking to these students, everything changed. After the Pulse nightclub shooting, I felt grief. It was that moment that I felt truly connected to the LGBT community and wondered, what's going on here? And I noticed that my students were also feeling grief and feeling anger and sadness and fear after such a tragically violent event. And I knew that this was what I wanted to study. And so I'm a trauma researcher, and I study cultural trauma, trauma that occurs within identity groups, understanding that our shared identities allow us to connect with one another, but also on a more basic level, human experiences of joy, sorrow, fear, pain, the list goes on, we can connect with each other. So when these violent events occur, we need to create supports that acknowledge identities, that acknowledge experiences, stressors, systems, in order to actually make a difference. You see, trauma work to me is an adventure because not any single experience will be alike the other. We all have different places in which we want to make a difference. My goal is to make a difference in connecting people to resources, but also connecting people to themselves. And so looking at me now, I'm going to share a little bit about where I am. So the Phoenix Empowered is still alive and well, uh, and I'm excited about it. And we're now taking on virtual platforms which allow us to connect with more people. But also, I'm in a doctoral program, and I am the only person in the doctoral program with a visible disability, and the first person in quite a few years who utilizes a wheelchair. And for a lot of people, that can be very anxiety provoking and very stressful, myself included. I often say I don't want to be a trailblazer, but what I do want to be is just one example of why it matters to be there and why it matters to take up space and to empower others. And so I hope that what this talk will give you is that you have the power, you are empowered to rise up, you are empowered to make change, you are empowered to heal with one another. And spaces do not need to be built for you, you take up space because your experience, your diversity, your identity, your intersectional experience needs to be at the table. If I didn't take stock of my identities, I would not be here with you all today, but I also wouldn't be doing work that really truly fulfills me in a way that I can't explain. I want to thank you all for having me today and for having such a beautiful space for me to attend. I'm honestly empowered by being here with all of you. I think that in a time of so much division and so much concern and stress and hate, it is so important to come together and say that, we see you, we hear you, we want to value you, and we want to see and hear and give you space to do what you need to do. Thank you all so much for being with me, and I look forward to answering some questions and sharing some more about me along the way.
Thank you so much, Jose. A couple of the officers from the Disabled Students and Allies Club were just talking how much your story resonates with us. And, we were just saying like, oh gosh, this makes me want to cry because this is things that we have gone through, things that we continue to go through. And it's been absolutely wonderful seeing how you have adapted, you have made society fit you versus the other way around. And it is truly, truly wonderful to see that. I will let everyone know that you can start asking questions to Jose. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you expand your screen a little bit, it'll be right should be under next to shared screen. It says Q&A. If you type out the questions there, you have an option to have me read the question on your behalf, or if you would like to read the question to Jose yourself, if you want to be on video and speak to Jose and the audience, you're more than welcome to do that. Just please let me know. And Jose has put his email in the chat about connect the phoenixempowered.org. And you can also find Jose on social media at symbol the Phoenix Empowered, or Jose J Rosario _27 on Instagram. So just a reminder, in the Q&A chat function, just feel free to post your questions there. It should allow you to, okay, there it is. The first question is from Jenny. Jenny, would you like me to read the question on your behalf? Yes, okay. So Jenny would like me to read this. Jenny asks, what would you say to a teenager that is only seeing disability as a problem and limitation right now?
I would say, first of all, I understand where that's coming from, right? Because we're living in a society where disability is labeled as a problem or a limitation. And so I understand where that's coming from. That being said, I want to share that your experience gives you information. And on a purely scientific level, it will give you data. And the data allows you to be empathetic, to connect with other people who may be feeling the same way. What I will share is that it is I think, normal to feel like disability can be a limitation or can be a problem or something that you're angry about. But what I will also say on the flip side of that is that disability can truly be something that allows you to connect with people in a way that feels really raw and authentic if you're willing to talk and share more about your experience. I'm not sure if that answered the question, but I'm happy to keep chatting.
Well, you're getting tons of questions, Jose, so we can always go back to it as well. I will do a question from Daisy because she put it in our chat. Daisy asks, what has been the biggest thing you have overcome in your life?
Ooh, I've never gotten that question before. Uh, I thought the Harry Potter house question would get me. What's the biggest thing I've overcome in my life? So the big thing is kind of broad. I think the big thing is creating my own destiny, forging my own path um, that isn't built on what society deems as a problem or what society deems as like my limitation. It's about what I want to accomplish for the world and for the people around me and the communities around me. Yeah.
Thank you. And then, so Jenny wanted me to say that that answered her question perfectly from before. And then this is not a question, but an anonymous attendee wanted to say that your story was incredibly inspiring and thank you. Taylor wanted to ask, what are some hobbies that you have that you engage in when you are feeling stressed, down, or frustrated?
Yeah. I had a friend today just ask me what I was doing for self-care, and I had trouble answering it, but I will give you sort of the things that I usually do. I really enjoy meditation, and even though my spiritual practice was something that caused me some harm, as it often does for a lot of queer folks, I enjoy that sort of spiritual meditative practice. And I'm human, so Netflix is pretty cool. So I've been binging some just shows that make me feel happy. Yeah.
And then another question is, what was your experience like with internalized feelings of doubt of your identities?
Yeah, I would say that's probably one of the more salient things that I went through, right? This internal doubt of what I was capable of, but also just maybe even to the level of anger and resentment towards my identities can be really toxic and really impacted my mental health. And you know, when I say I was depressed, I mean considering taking my own life was even on the table at one point because I was so distraught. And I think that experience, one, made me understand why systems have so much power, but it also made me want to be a trauma therapist. I'm not sure if that's relevant to your question, but it's what led me that way because healing can happen with the right support and resources and the right people in your corner.
Thank you, Jose. We have a question from Tiara who says, why were you so focused on the trauma aspect of your professional journey?
Yeah, because I think that these experiences of microaggressions or these experiences of feeling like you don't belong, coupled with acts of violence or acts of severe hate and divisive rhetoric, can be really traumatic for many communities, not just a single member of the community, but that shared identity really does impact so many people. And so the focus on trauma is really about the fact that, like, there is a connection when you share an identity with somebody. And what are we doing to make sure that community healing is also happening? So I would say, yeah, the trauma is important, but even more important is that community level healing and resiliency. But I really appreciate that question because I wanted to make sure that came across.
Thank you. Our next question is from Elizabeth. First with a comment and then a question.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It was very inspiring. What keeps you motivated to keep going and advocating for people with disabilities, especially those who come from minority groups?
Yeah, so I will share a sort of inside scoop that I don't typically share, but my original bio for for these talks had said that I was a disability advocate, and that wasn't the term that I had put in my bio. It was something that was sort of added over time, and I would say that I'm less of a specifically disability advocate and more of a human rights advocate. I hold so many different identities that feel so important to me. And so I would say what motivates me to keep going. Oh, I'm getting a note that I'm unstable. So let me know if y'all can hear me.
Can hear you just fine. And if it keeps being unstable, Jose, if you turn off your camera for a little bit, it should stabilize out and you can turn it back on.
Sure. Advocating for individuals with disabilities is important because it's all a part of the same problem, right? And so access and and ability to live the life that you want to live is a universal thing.
Thank you, Jose. Our next question says, what do you think is the biggest or most common issue with access for disabled students on college campuses right now?
Yeah, I would say physical access, right? Access to physical spaces is still a pretty important challenge that we are still trying to address. But I also think part of it is around our conversation about disability and viewing disability as a form of diversity that can be celebrated, that we can learn from, is not something that is pretty common yet. And so I think the biggest challenge is these limitations that are placed on us as individuals with disabilities about what we can accomplish or what we can offer. And it's through events and spaces like this that I think that's changing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jose. Our next, or I should start with a comment and then a question, is from Hayden, who says, Jose, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was unbelievably powerful. Their question is, how can you be an ally to those with disabilities? I work as a paraeducator and would love to hear your feedback.
Yeah. The biggest part of being an ally is engaging in active listening. You know, a person with a disability many times will communicate with you what we need or what we would like you to assist with, both on a actual like physical assisting, but also just emotionally. What we need will be communicated, and so I think it's important to listen. It's important to use the right kind of language as well, and so making sure that we say things like people with disabilities is super important because we are people. We are people first. Disability is just one aspect of our identity and not the label that we're going to impose on individuals. And I think through all of that and that listening and being cautious about what your words mean is really what we do as allies. We listen and reflect back.
Thank you, Jose. Our next question is, or comment and then question. Your family clearly gave you a lot of strength, but stresses in family relations can be particularly exhausting. Do you have additional thoughts to offer on how to navigate through this?
Yeah. This is a hard one given again, I'm gonna pull on the fact like Latino families, for me at least, family is a really important thing. And so there's some guilt associated with like not wanting to push away. But to some extent, that's those family stressors oftentimes are not a reflection of you, but a reflection of what's going on in the other person. And so we already have a hard enough time navigating our own experiences as intersectional humans. Everybody does their own work, and we can't control the actions, thoughts, and behaviors of other people. All we can do is hope that they will support and empower us. If they won't, we'll find another space.
Thank you, Jose. Our next question is from Julia. Julia says, first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was beautiful and just so amazing. And so thank you. Secondly, especially during these crazy, stupid, and hard times, how have you been able to stay motivated or positive, especially seeing how easy it is to slip into a slump?
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to be very honest and very real and hope that bodes well for all of you. I'm not always positive and motivated. Like things are really hard. And especially, particularly this week, I've been really struggling to stay motivated. And part of what that has been like for me is practicing some real forgiveness with self and saying it's okay to not do advocacy today. It's okay to turn your phone off and watch Netflix, or it's okay to, you know, I'm not saying skip class, but it's okay to take some time off in order to heal yourself. As people who are constantly trying to make change and trying to empathize with people and care about the world, sometimes you have to step back. And so, my biggest advice about staying motivated or positive is to welcome whatever emotions come and understand that they're valid and real, and work through them in your own space and in your own time, because emotions are waves, they come and go. And if you slip into a slump, lean on the people around you, and you can all get out of your slumps together, because we're in the same boat.
Thank you so much, Jose. Our next question is from Veronica. I work as a case manager with disabilities, especially specifically brain injury. Do you have any tools or written resources for clinicians that you would suggest to help support people's variety of identities? Such as during our intake process, what are some questions we can ask clients to make sure that we aren't just focusing on one part of the client's identity, but the whole person?
Yeah. When I'm doing an intake personally, I like to start with things that are a little bit more broad. And so things like, tell me about you. What are some important things about you that you want me to know? Um, how would you describe yourself? And so these sort of open ended questions that allow people to tell us what identities feel the most salient. Because even though we might think, for example, someone's racial identity is salient, it might not be in that moment, and we don't want to make that assumption. And so giving the person the opportunity to frame themselves, to frame their experiences in a way that's authentic to what they need.
Thank you. Our next question is from Tiara. Also, who inspires you to keep moving forward and advocate for those who have disabilities?
um, I'm smiling because the answer to this question is always my parents. While they're not perfect, none of us are. I am so grateful that they believed in me even when I didn't, and that they saw, even though they weren't, skilled with the language and what it meant to be advocates, they saw that the person in front of me had affected me, and said, "We're not going to let that be the narrative for this child." And so I'm grateful for that. But in terms of like broad strokes, who inspires me, I mean, there's people like Brene Brown, and Lin-Manuel Miranda. Just a little side note about my personal life. I love Lin-Manuel, and so all these different activists that are coming together, especially in this new generation.
Thank you. Our next question is regarding negative connotations and language surrounding disability. What keeps you going through some of these negativity surrounding disability, both physical and mental?
Mm. Yeah, when I think about negative connotation, I automatically think about stigma, and I think about the role that labels play. Um, And my philosophy and what I like to do with my life is hopefully reject labels as much as possible, and share that labels are not, again, the experience of a person. It's just one piece of a person. And so I think that part of going through the negative connotation and stigma is understanding that no matter what society is telling you about what your experience should be like, no two people have the same experience. And that if you need support, you should get support, because that's valid. And if you need some space, you can take some space. And it's really just being in touch with oneself and what one needs.
Our next question asks if you can talk about struggles with self confidence. I know we all deal with our own versions of disabilities, and it's hard to feel worthy.
Yeah, absolutely. During the time of my adolescence, when I was feeling really sad and depressed and getting a lot of judgment based on my appearance, I struggled to look in the mirror. There was about a 2 year span where I avoided all reflective surfaces, and still to this day have moments where I'm really struggling to look at myself or accept myself as a adult man with a disability even. And I think part of that struggle is being aware of how each part of you has brought you to where you are. There's every single part of you that has led you to whatever moment you're in. And in this present moment, you are fully valued and fully valid. And taking all of the sort of physical attractiveness or beauty standards aside, in this moment, you are here. And that is something to celebrate. And that to me has been helpful with my self-confidence, that even when I don't feel the best about myself, I recognize I'm here and I'm going to do something with today because I get to be here.
And Jennifer, who is actually our president of our Disabled Students and Allies Club, has asked, who are your greatest supporters besides your parents?
Yeah. I'm going to be cheesy and say all of you, right? Because this is a community that we're building. And I think that all of these empowerment spaces, part of why I love doing talks is because it's not about sharing, oh, look how far I've come. It's about sharing that life was hard and that life is hard for all of us. And coming together with all of you and creating space to talk about identity and mental health, that didn't happen 10 years ago. And so it's exciting and inspiring to be here with all of you. You all are change makers, and I'm honored to be in your presence. Yeah.
Our next question is from Daisy. Daisy asks, what has been your biggest achievement thus far, and what else would you like to achieve?
Yeah. These are some really good questions. I've been very, very fortunate to do things like co-author a poetry book and do a TEDx talk, and these things were great. But I would say my biggest achievement was taking that first step and sharing my story the first time because it changed everything. None of these achievements or material things matter because I was able to connect with myself on a level that I don't know would have been possible otherwise. And so that would be my biggest achievement.
Our next question relates to issues in the workplace for people with disabilities. What are some of the biggest issues for disabled people in the workplace, and what can we do as a society to combat these issues?
Mhm. So part of it is education. So we know that the ADA has a title all about employment, and there are standards and procedures put in place for accessible employment, however you may define accessible. And so I think part of that is education for individuals with disabilities and employers, yes, but also something that Dr. Jeffrey said earlier, universal design, right? And so we should be thinking about anyone being able to do these jobs when they're qualified to do them, even acknowledging their differing levels of ability. And so ability should not be something that impedes someone to receive a job. We should already be building these jobs so that the best qualified person can meet them. And so society really needs to move away from this like almost post action mentality of like, oh, now you're here, we're going to make things accessible. It's saying we value the contribution that you bring and we know that anyone can walk through our door, so let's make sure that anyone can take this job, or that we have the resources to make changes in order to make sure that the best person can receive this job. And I would say, just on a logistical note, make sure that you're engaging with community resources if you're having trouble making accommodations at places of employment. It's important to have support.
Our next question is from Tiara. What advice would you give to those of us who feel insecure about getting help from the Access Center due to maybe not feeling as if their disability is visible or not as severe as others?
Mhm. Yeah, there definitely tends to be differing levels of like needing to seek services based on level of disability. I would reject that notion. So if you were going to the doctor, for example, and you had a broken arm, just because somebody else has a broken leg doesn't mean that you don't deserve to have services. No one person is more deserving of support. And so, accommodations are similar. No one person's disability is going to outweigh another person's disability. They're individual experiences. So if you feel like supports and tools and resources will help you be successful and create the life that you want, I say you should always try and seek those supports and not feel like you're less deserving, or not feel as though it's not for you, it's for other people. It's for anyone who needs it. Yeah, I'll stop there. I can go on about this, but
Our next question is in regards to your LGBTQ identity. How did you find it hard to find the courage to speak about your mental health and LGBTQ identity with your family, as Hispanic households don't tend to talk about those things? And thank you very much for sharing your story. It's very important to see people of color rising up.
yeah, man, oh man, I have to say it was challenging and still is challenging, because I think to some extent it's hard to talk about the experience without other people needing to recognize their role in that experience. And so it tends to be really hard, particularly um, because I don't want people in my family to feel like, oh, it's my fault. Uh, but what I will say is I find the courage because of other people who are like me, who are feeling like they are not represented, who are feeling like they don't know anyone who has gone through or is going through similar things. And so that's where my courage comes from. It's representation, because without representation, we can't make change and we can't support one another. So I will openly share my experiences if it means that I can connect with other people and support people through that.
Thank you, Jose. Our next question is from Avery, who says, do you think there's an increased need in our communities for legal advocacy for those with disabilities? Also, thank you for speaking today and being vulnerable.
Yeah, part of what I think about a lot is the sort of legal um, resources for individuals with disabilities. And now different states have different um, services available. I do think there is an increased need. I think there's an increased need for conversations around disability rights and disability access. Um, Given our ever-changing landscape of our country, this is always going to be important. But I think civil liberties in general require increased attention. And I would love to see more resources for people with disabilities.
Jose, our next question is from Madison. Regarding your LGBTQ plus identity, have you ever struggled with internalized homophobia? And if so, how do you or did you work through it?
Yeah. Yes. So and my apologies for not talking about this more. But yes, definitely. So, like I shared very briefly, I grew up in a very evangelical Christian household, and so this was not something that was ever talked about or we ever did. And so I struggled a lot, and that was a big part of my mental health, sort of what I would call a spiral. And I was very depressed because I couldn't be authentic. And so the thing that pulled me out was a friend of mine who is a trans priest and said to me, you're loved and you're valued because of who you are, not in spite of who you are. And I hold those words so deeply in my heart and soul that I can't express. But I think the thing that pulled me out was recognizing I'm a human who has value, and that my struggle with this is going to bring value and healing to other people, I really hope. And so that's what pulled me out, I guess I would say. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Um, Josephine just wanted to say that this presentation was amazing and thank you for speaking with all of us today. Our next question comes from Alexis. Alexis asks, what can I do as a person who who is not a person with a disability? What can I do to advocate for those who have them and do not get the help that they need and or may be outcasted for having them? Also, as a member of the Latinx community, I totally understand what it's like to feel like you're pushing away from your family and for being true to yourself. Thank you for continuing to push every day.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that comment. I think part of what I'm going to say about what you can do to advocate for individuals with disabilities is maybe not even advocating for individuals with disabilities. It's about listening to the concerns and barriers and current stressors of individuals with disabilities, being willing to share space with these individuals to share these concerns on a wider level. And if there aren't opportunities for individuals to share these concerns, help create those spaces. As a person who is not disabled, you can use your privilege to create spaces where these conversations can happen. I like to call allies key stakeholders. Without these stakeholders, the space doesn't happen where we can have these conversations. And so we need stakeholders.
Thank you, Jose. Our next question asks, what are you looking forward to moving forward? What are your next steps or things you want to reach in the future?
Mhm. Oh man. I have a dream, although I'm going to call it a dream and a mission because I feel like it is possible for identity and mental health work to be something that is common sense and common language, and something that we talk about on a global level. And so my goal is to advocate globally for an intersectional um, view of mental health, particularly around healing and trauma and distress, because I think it's important.
Jose, and our next question is if you could go back and speak to your younger self, what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, I would tell myself that, yeah, it hurts right now, and that's okay. You're allowed to hurt, you're allowed to feel, but know that this is going to mean something, and that every experience we have, both the difficult ones and the positive ones, are moments where we can take what we're learning about ourselves and really create change and create community with one another. Again, we all know what it's like to feel pain. We all know what it's like to feel sad. We also know what it's like to feel joy and hope. And so, if we can connect with one another based on those experiences, that's the magic. So, I would say, hold on, because more is coming.
Thank you so much, Jose. And we have a wonderful comment. This is also for Jose and for the group as a whole, from our participant, Carla, who says another group to be aware of is those who have experienced TBIs and brain injuries. Brain injury is the #1 disability in our country and known as the invisible disability. Clinicians need to ask their clients if they have ever experienced trauma and in their head. There are brain injury alliances and brain injury associations across the country, but that information and resources about brain injury. Carla Joe is with the Brain Injury Alliance in Washington. I will share this information below so that you all can contact Carla if you want that as a resource. And then I have another question. Someone wants to know how we as audience members can connect with Phoenix Empowered. What can we do to stay connected with you and be part of this initiative?
Yeah, yeah. So we are living in a world of social media and virtual connections galore. So I would say connect with me on social media, both my personal one, J Rosario _27, but also the Phoenix Empowered. We're just at the Phoenix Empowered on Instagram, and keep up with what we're doing. My goal is to eventually be able to really create a beautiful community that empowers one another. And you can also email me. My email's in the chat, but it's just connect@thephoenixempowered.org. You are part of what I like to affectionately call my tribe. You're my people now. So, yes, always feel free to connect.
And then, Jose, I have some questions that are coming in via email as well, asking how, as student groups supporting or that are focused on students with disabilities, so student groups with students with disabilities, how can they be better and do better for this population?
Mm. I think that if you're worried about doing better, you're already halfway there because you care, and it's evident that you care. And again, I'm going to go back to my same response. I think it's really truly about listening, about being willing to create spaces, about being willing to support individuals with disabilities in sharing their own experiences and not speaking for individuals with disabilities. Now, on a more systemic level, as a student group, I think part of that is making sure disability is always at the table, and making sure that concerns about access and concerns about um, accommodations and things like that are always brought up when we talk about things like diversity. Oftentimes, when we think of diversity, it usually stops at a couple of identities, and then we kind of forget that other forms of diversity exist. And disability, many times in my experience, has been one that can be forgotten. And so, just making sure it's at the table.
And then we have a couple more questions, Jose, and I think these will probably be the last for these sessions. Our next question is, how would you go about reaching out to resources if you are in a place that is where resources are very limited, such as rural communities?
Yeah, I mean, one, I want to be very upfront and say that is an area that we need to do more work in providing very tangible resources in all communities. And part of my mission is to do things like that. But I do think if you have access to virtual resources, online resources can be very valuable. There are online forums, there are communities that talk about disability. I think social media is another really awesome tool that can be really helpful, also be problematic, but we're going to stick to being helpful for right now. Um, so I think that engaging virtually or engaging with technology in a way that can support you.
Okay, Jose, our next question is, what advice would you give to a parent with an LGBTQ plus child who's having a hard time accepting it?
Mm, yeah. Um, oh, this is very different from the kinds of questions I usually answer. But what I would say is, they're still your child, and the most important thing that we can do for people who are different than us is listen and value them and love them, and not in a way where we're saying we love you, but it's saying we love you and we see you. Um, Even if this one part of you is hard to accept, that person is still a person in your life. And so I would say, do your best to just love and love wholeheartedly and fully. And um, as I would tell my mother, and we're still in the process of like engaging with our own experiences together, just love, and we'll figure it out the rest of the way. But I think if your child knows that you care and that you're not going anywhere, that is the most powerful thing you can do for them.
Jose, and then we have a question via email that is in relation to something you discussed with your multiple identities being first gen. And
Mhm.
it's something that is very important to WSU as a whole. We're very proud of our first generation students. We have a lot of initiatives on campus that discuss this and provide resources. But can you talk about how being a first gen impacts the resources you received as a student with a disability?
Yeah, yeah. I think similarly, drawing a parallel to my parents in the hospital, being first gen means I don't understand, or I didn't understand the kinds of resources that were available, and to some extent felt like, well, I'm going to work really hard because I've always worked really hard and got into college, and so I don't need resources. When in reality, that's not true. One thing does not negate the other. And so I think part of being first gen and what I wish I would have had, and luckily eventually did have, is guidance about what is out there to actually support me. Uh, could you read back the question just to make sure that I answered it?
Sure. It was an was your first gen status, did it impact your ability to get resources as a student with disabilities?
Yeah. So yeah, the lack of knowledge, but I think that having the right supports allowed me to access those things. Also, there's no handbook on how to access college with a disability. It's going to look so different for everybody, and so I think one, supporting other folks with disabilities, even if it's not the same experience, but two, just talking to each other about what's going on. You can learn a lot from each other.
And then this is not a question, but a really wonderful comment from an audience member that says, "Hi, you're super cool, first of all. No question. I just wanted to say that I'm proud of how proud you are. And I will definitely be sharing your information with my friends who have disabilities and are scared to embrace their sexuality out of fear of being further ostracized. And you inspired me, and I know you'll inspire them too. Thank you so much."
Thank you. That's really sweet. And I will say, to some extent, I'm here to inspire, but I'm also hopefully here to empower you, because I am just one person who still has a long way to go in his own healing process. We all do, but I hope that I created a space with you all today where we can chat and be real with one another.
Jose, I got another question that
Mhm,
discusses something that you talked about during your presentation. You
mhm.
mentioned different terms such as ally and activist, and also, hold on, let me see, an advocate. So, activist, advocate, and ally. What are the differences between those, and what should I be as a person who does not have a disability?
Yeah. Oh man, oh man, oh man. I feel like you can be all of those things, but an ally to me is a person who maybe doesn't share the same experiences, but is willing to listen and support somebody who is different from them. So supporting across difference. An advocate is somebody who points out that there are clear, gaps in our system. Somebody that says like, you're not thinking about, how individuals with visual impairments, for example, access IQ test. This is something that we haven't thought about. And the activist is kind of taking all of those things and mobilizing into action. And so it's almost like they're different steps of the same process, is how I would explain it. Um, Hopefully that makes sense. Oh, you're muted.
Oops. Yes. Thank you so much, Jose. Our next comment is from Sonia, who says, I had a traumatic brain injury, internal bleeding, severe concussion, and fell into a deep state coma. I have problems with memory retention. Do you have advice with that? I battle with it every day. By the way, you have an amazing story, Jose. You were very inspiring.
Thank you so much. Um, yeah, I guess in different aspects of life, both professionally, academically, I'm not sure where you are in your personal life, but I think a big part of that is trusting that it's okay to seek support, even when society tells you that it's not, or that you should be able to do something. It's okay to need to find alternative ways in which we're going to accomplish the same goal. And so, in the workplace, for example, it is perfectly acceptable, and I encourage you to seek those supports to help you achieve what you want to achieve. So this is just a part of you. This is not your limitation of where you can reach, is what I would say.
Jose, one of the participants was really touched by the fact that you kind of came full circle with being receiving services at your access center to providing services. So they wanted to know what advice you can give to students who have received services and want to go into the field of being an access advisor and providing those services for people like them.
Yeah, yeah. So I am a former higher education professional, not currently a higher ed professional, but I will say, I think apply for these positions because, and here's why. I'm not saying that every individual in an access center needs to have a disability. That is not the point of hiring you. The point is hiring you so that your experiences guide your empathy, and that's what these spaces look for. They look for individuals who can take their own experiences and know what it's like to feel like it's scary to access services, or I'm afraid of assuming this label, and talking through with students what that is like, and being really honest and authentic. So I would say apply for these positions because we need you, and apply not because you have a disability, but because of the things that you offer because of that.
Thank you so much, Jose. And I that's it for our questions. And I will just elaborate on, what you talking about, coming full circle. I am in the same experience as you. I'm a doctoral candidate at WSU, and I received accommodations at a certain point during my graduate degree. And now I'm an access advisor who provides those services. So I completely agree that it can help you with the empathetic nature. Your lived experiences can help guide how you um, look at these cases, these different documentation, and how you work with students. So I will also like to say that any students who do have a disability and you are not registered with the Access Center, please reach out to us. I can put my email in the chat if you have any questions, but you're not sure. That's what we're here for. We're here to help. And that's one reason we put on these wonderful events, is to bring awareness to accommodation services that are provided at the university, and to bring awareness about the important disability issues that are happening at Washington State University. So I will put our email down in the chat. Feel free to reach out to us. It's at access.center@wsu.edu. If you have any questions or just want to talk to an advisor, we have office hours, so you can talk to us or schedule an appointment. It looks like we may have one more question coming in, and I'll let this be our last question and then we'll wrap it up. Our question is, or I should say, thank you for sharing your story. Do you have any advice to share with someone who is interested in working in the mental health field?
Right before I answer that question, very quickly, I just want to acknowledge that WSU is very lucky to have dedicated and driven professionals who care about these things. And so, thank you all for putting this on, and thank you for being, doing this work, for being in that space, because we need you. And it's just so great to see so many amazing professionals coming together. So, advice for people wanting to work in the mental health field. mental health is a really broad topic, and so what I would say is find the thing that really interests you, the thing that you're passionate about, and then find people doing that work who can start to give you some of that experience. Now, if my story taught you anything, I hope that it taught you that mental health work happens in the most unexpected places. I never thought I would be an access counselor, for example, but that is what shaped my entire PhD journey. It's why my research is what it is. And so I would say be open to whatever comes your way and find mentorship. And if you have more specific questions, I'm happy to chat offline.
Thank you so much, Jose. So that will be the end of our questions, and I will leave us as at this point to let you know that our last event of our Disability Awareness Speaker Series is November 18th with Sarah Minkara, and her presentation will be on the intersection of disability and religion. And I know Jose talked a little bit about that, how his identity with religion intersects with all his other identities. So Sarah will be discussing her experience as being a blind Muslim woman who also has a number of different identities as well. So it'll be a wonderful presentation. We hope you attend. Last minute housekeeping details. We do have our presentation this Friday for our Disability and Intersectionality virtual book club. It is on the book Disability Visibility. The discussion will be from 4 to 5 p.m. And this is on part 3 of the Disability Visibility book on doing. And we hope that you are able to attend that. Information on the book club is on our website. You do not have to read the book to be part of the discussion. We'd love to have you there. And let's see, I know we received one more question. Oh, Mary just wants to say thank you very much, that this was a great presentation. Last minute details, I have put in the chat the Qualtrics link for common reading credit. Make sure that you click that to receive your common reading credit. For those who are getting extra credit in classes and programming, as soon as I end the session, it will automatically link you to a Qualtrics survey where it asks for your professor's name and email so that I can contact them, letting them know you attended the event today. So we are sorry that we have to end this because this was a wonderful presentation, but thank you so much, Jose, for being here. Thank you, Dr. Matthew Jeffries, for opening up this wonderful discussion. And thank you all for being here. This issue about disability and intersectionality is so important, and we cannot get out the word without all of you. So thank you again for being here, and thank you for making a difference for the lives of people with disabilities at our university. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.